It is Monday, June 1st, and this is the IPhoneography podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Greg McMillan, and I am joined by a good friend who's taking Dave's place tonight, Joseph Ferreira. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. It's been a minute since I've been on a podcast lately.
Yeah. Well, we kind of had a little roundtable discussion with Matt Hoffman and Dave and you and I, and we just kind of shot the breeze and
Yeah.
kind of like meeting in a coffee shop, but virtually. So that was
Yeah.
nice, and we were able to catch up a little bit. And so this is my second YouTube version of the show. The last one, there was a few little issues with the audio and the video and whatnot, but I thought, I'm going to put it on there anyway. and
That's all right.
so, yeah, I mean, I'm learning, and I'm going to see how it goes with the number of views and the time people watch them and things like that. And if it just doesn't pan out, then I won't have to worry about putting them on anymore. But I'd like to put them on just to kind of show people what we're talking about a little bit here. So,
Well, can I just kind of mention a little of my experience with that?
Sure.
So with our church, I'm an associate pastor at my church, and I do all the video and audio for the website. And I notice that I have more interaction on Facebook than I do on YouTube. I still do YouTube mainly because you never know when things are going to pick up and do it. So people will think I need to wait for YouTube to take off before I do video. It's like, no, just do video, continue to do video. And then eventually when they find you, they're like, oh, look at all these videos. I'm going to go back and watch all these videos. The next thing you know, you start seeing this uptick of views. So just do it all.
Yeah. I think the last show probably shouldn't have been my first one because it was an hour and a half and it was all about WWDC, which really has nothing to do with what the podcast is about. So
you don't never know when somebody might find that interesting, going, that's what that was. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. But this week we are going to continue our series on the discussion that was started with when Matt Hoffman came in and covered for me. Him and Dave, they started the camera series, I guess you could call it. Excuse me. And they talked about macro. Now, no, the iPhone doesn't have a macro camera, but there's a lot that you could do with macro with the iPhone. So that's kind of where they went with that. And we're going to talk about the wide camera. There's, depending on which iPhone you have, it could have 1, 2, or 3 cameras. Or if you count the front-facing camera, that's 4. And yeah, and you and I both have 3 cameras on the back and 1 on the front, obviously. And we're going to look at the wide camera. Some people call it the 1X because it's the 1 times or whatever. But I always like to call them what Apple calls them. So I'm going to stick with the wide camera. And, when I refer to the telephoto, I'll say telephoto or the ultra wide or whatever. So they obviously have, it's not just lenses, it's cameras. And obviously they have different apertures because the wide camera is the one that has the best quality. And do you have a favorite one that you like to use, Joe?
Actually, the wide is my favorite. I tend to go for the wide because it looks more natural.
Yeah.
Telephoto, yeah, it's good to be able to go in, but the super wide is not really my favorite. Unless I'm really trying to pull something off, I typically will go with the wide.
Yeah. And now Sebastian DeWitt from Halide, his favorite camera is the telephoto. And I'm starting to see why, because I'm starting to use it a little more, but that's for another show.
Well, yeah,
We'll
it doesn't make you look fat.
yeah, that's right.
I know I should have
Yeah.
said my favorite was a selfie camera, but
Yeah. But I mean, and you use you do a lot of video,
yeah.
so I'm sure that makes a big difference too. Like,
I'll tell you
different looks and whatnot.
the most I use is the wide angle. When I do, let's say I'm in a situation where I have I'll have two cameras, and they're actually iPhones. So I'm using two iPhones, iPhone 6S's for camera angle 1, camera angle 2, and then I'll use my iPhone 11 and use the wide, the super wide to be able to see everything in close quarters. So it's almost like you're stepping back, but you're actually really close. It does look a little funky, but it kind of helps in that situation. If you're going to use the wide angle, I'd have to pull the camera back in order to fill the frame. Definitely with a telephoto, it has to go way back, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, so the one thing I like about the wide is, and this goes for just about any iPhone, is that the aperture is, the largest out of the camera systems that are on the phone. And so on the 12 Pro Max that I have, the aperture is actually f1.6. And I think that's the widest they've ever put on the camera system. So I'm really pleased with the with the quality of the images that I get with that wide aperture. And I'm echoing. I can hear myself.
Okay. I'm trying to pull up what the aperture is. Is it 1.8?
I believe it's 1.8 on the 11 Pro. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it gives you really good image quality. And to that point, Moment says, if you're going to put the, the telephoto lens that they have, let's see, how does that go? If you want to make a really wide image, like kind of like the ultra wide, instead of using the ultra wide camera, put their wide angle lens on the wide camera of the iPhone. And this is going to sound convoluted, but the reason to do that is to get better image quality with the better aperture. Right. And I was doing that, and I got to admit, I found the images to be a little softer than with the ultra wide with no lens on it. Even though the aperture is not as good on the ultra wide, it just didn't have the clarity or the sharpness.
Well, you're taking and putting a lens on top of a lens.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, and I never thought I would do this, but I sold my wide angle, my Moment wide, and my Moment tele because I just wasn't going to use them, and for that reason. So, there's a guy that I work with who bought an iPhone and saw that I was using these lenses and really was interested in them. So I sold them to him, and he's really loving, the fun that he's having with them. But so I think the most common use as far as photographers go for a wide angle camera is the landscape. And of course, that's my favorite thing to shoot. And I'm going to just pull up some images here to show the difference between what a landscape would look like from the, first I'll start with sunsets. How's that? Okay, let me go like this.
Can't go wrong with a good sunset.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So there's, I thought that would have been bigger. There's a sunset with the wide. Oops. There we go. What am I doing here? Okay. There's a sunset with the ultra wide camera.
Yeah.
You get a lot of the sky in, you get more of the
That looks
water
really
in.
good.
Yeah, thanks. That's actually the one that I actually chose to post on Instagram. And then
Nice.
you got the wide.
Right.
Uh, you know it. You get there's birds here in the sky,
Yeah.
and they're nice and clear. You can see them. It's not bad. It just for a sunset to me, it just didn't show enough. And then, oops, and there's the telephoto. Um, it has the worst of the three cameras for as far as aperture goes. So the sky is not as, to me, it's just not as clear. It's a little more mottled, more muddy looking.
Right.
Um, but
It looks like
uh,
it's compensating.
yeah, yeah, and the only one of these that I've edited is the ultra wide.
Yeah. The ultra wide, I'll tell you from what I'm seeing right here, and this is what everybody else is saying. It looks really good. It's a good way of being able to utilize the almost fisheye look, and
yeah,
the clouds lend towards making it look good. Whereas
mhm.
if you had people standing there, it'd be like,
Yeah, that's right.
It almost gives a 30,000 foot look to it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that the other side of the bay is, I'm gonna guess it's probably maybe a mile away, maybe not quite a mile. No, I don't think it's a mile. It's probably about a half a mile. But yeah, there's the telephoto. So the telephoto actually gives you more of what you almost look like, you see with your eyes,
Yes.
as opposed to being something. Oops, you know. Oh, that's the telephoto there. I'm getting so mixed up. But anyway, well, that's the difference between them anyway. So there's the telephoto, the ultra wide, and then the wide.
Yeah.
Um, just the wide has the best aperture, so it's going to give you the best image quality. And as far as angle of view goes, is okay, but in this case, the ultra wide definitely was the one to give the better image. So that is the sunset. This is my vehicle.
The
Uh,
RAV4.
yeah, it's the Blue Rav on Instagram. Shameless plug. Now this is with the telephoto, and
That
just
looks
to
good.
show you what the optics do when you go to the wide, it just changes the whole look of the image. It really emphasizes the part that's closest to the viewer. Excuse me. In this case, it's the front corner of the vehicle,
Yeah.
and it just gives it a whole different look, as opposed to the telephoto. So when I shoot the RAV, I kind of like to use the telephoto just because it looks a little more natural, unless I'm going for kind of a funky look. But
The wide will have a uh, almost it's starting to get that fisheye look
yeah,
towards
a little distorted. Yeah,
little distorted. The wide is good for groups maybe far away. Telephoto is really good for individuals because you're not widening their faces. And so
yeah,
that looks more natural than the wide angle does. But it still looks good because you're getting a different view, and it's adding some character to the other one just looks like it's safe. This one's
yeah,
a little
yeah,
edgy. That's safe. That's more edgy.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, and I guess it all depends on the look that you're after too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then I was at a local river, and this is with the wide camera. So you're going to get a little more of the river in there, more of the sky, again. And this is a typical landscape example. And then there's with the telephoto.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see it very well, but the quality of the image, like the image quality of the trees and stuff, is just not as crisp and clean
it's almost like their programming went to try to define the leaves, and it's not there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just a little, that. Okay, so the aperture of the telephoto camera is 2.4, and that's quite a difference between 2.4 and 1.6. Like, and I should note too that on the 12 Pro Max, at least, the focal length. No, what was I going to say? The sensor. The sensor is actually larger.
Nice.
Yeah, like it's. Okay, so when it came to deciding which phone to buy, when I was getting the 12 Pro, whether to get just the Pro or just the Max, the Pro has a 2 point. What is it? On the telephoto, it has a 2.0, I think. Yeah, a 2.0 aperture. So, and on the Pro Max, it's 2.2. The trade-off was on the Max, it has a 65 millimeter equivalent focal length, whereas on the Pro, it's 52, I think. So the reach doesn't have quite as much reach. Okay. And this is all supposed to be wide angle, but I mean, we're getting into everything here. But so with the wide camera, I went for the larger sensor size, plus it's stabilized within the body, not just the lens. And that was kind of the deal maker too for me. And it's the only one that has that kind of stabilization. None of the other phones have ever had it. Now they're saying next year they're all going to have it. All the cameras are going to have in-body stabilization. The ultra wide, the wide, and the telephoto on the Pro models.
Wow.
And I think even on the regular iPhone 13, if that's what they call it, I think it's going to have the same sensor stabilization.
13.
I don't know. What do you think? No, you don't think so? They had iOS 13.
Yeah, but nobody cares about the operating systems.
Gosh,
Mac users are going to use it no matter what.
So, do you think they'll jump to 14 or just 12S?
Or they'll probably call it the iPhone Lucky or something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. It just, to me, like, you have buildings, they skip the 13th floor. It's a maintenance floor.
Yeah.
Something like that. I could see them on the off chance saying, well, we don't want it to be 13. Well,
yeah, it's going to be interesting. The only thing that I'm in my gut that I'm really certain that they're going to do is give us portrait video. And it may just be the Pro models. I don't know, but I think they're going to give us portrait video because at WWDC, they said there's going to be portrait video in FaceTime calls in iOS 15.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So if they can basically display that video without recording it, like in FaceTime, you can't record FaceTime. If they can display that video, they might have the processing power in the next iPhone to actually record with it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. And I think that's going to be the one feature that, they say coming in the fall or coming later this fall, just like portrait mode was when the 7 came out, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the cameras. Excuse me. And the last video, I tried to cut out all coughing and all that nonsense. I'm just going to leave it in this time. It's going to, I'm going to take the marks.
This is a non-edit show.
That's right. I'm going to take the Marc Sadowski route and just what you see is what you get, baby.
Yeah. I don't edit that much out of our shows that we're doing, and it works out well. We keep it to 30 minutes and we don't edit anything out. Unless it's we record conversations with missionaries and other people, and some missionaries, they have to either have their faces blurred or you can't say their names or other stuff like that because they're in highly sensitive areas. And, so if there is something that popped up that would cause their lives to be in danger, then I do cut it out. But, there's no,
I think we're pretty safe here.
Yes. If somebody comes after us, it'll probably be an Android user, but, we like our Android users.
Oh yes. And tangent again, FaceTime will be available on Android phones via the browser with a link. You could send someone with an Android phone a link to your FaceTime call. They click on the link and it opens up the call in their browser. So that's pretty cool. I'm really liking the direction that they're taking with this stuff.
Now, will we get it on Windows?
Yep.
PC?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think it's going to be probably just about any platform. Now, I don't know about the Linux and things like that,
right?
But if the browser's compatible, then it'll work. So that's kind of cool.
Something real here. Yeah, I realized I didn't change my name. Hold on.
Oh, that's all right. But so yeah, back to the cameras. When you're using a wide angle, obviously shooting horizontally will emphasize what you see side to side, especially with a landscape, or like you say, if you have a group of people that you're taking a picture of. And I've done this with my family, and my mom's family is big. Like there's a lot of them. Okay. What I would do is I would get them to what's that?
No, I was just glad you clarified that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's large in numbers. But what I would do is I would get them to kind of get in a semicircle, as long as they're within range of the viewfinder. And unfortunately, that makes the ones on the ends look a little larger than life, because that's what wide angle does. And the ones in the middle, they were the lucky ones. They look kind of normal.
Yeah. Now, if you inverted okay, let me think. Would they be concave when you take a picture of them?
I don't know. All I know is that they're stretched out. All I know is that they're stretched out. As you go from the center, and then as you go across this way to the edge, they get wider. And I've had complaints about people tell me would you make me look fat for?
Yeah,
it's the nature of the lens.
Yeah, the other thing that you have to be aware of is whether you're taking a picture in portrait or in landscape too, because let's say you do it in landscape, the middle of like the 1:1 format of the wide angle will actually be truer than say a 16:9. Because even there with the wide angle, you're going to get the same thing as if it was like a super wide. So when you turn it to portrait, a lot of times you think, oh, it's portrait mode, I'm going to take a picture of a person. But what ends up happening is their head ends up being wider at the top than the center of the photo. So what I do is I take it in landscape, take the picture in landscape, and then I crop it into portrait if I want it to be a portrait. That way you're not making their head fat.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Never thought of that, but I mean, admittedly, I don't take pictures of people a lot.
Yeah. I do
Like I
more
say,
people.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so speaking of portrait, and that just means the vertical orientation, not portrait mode as in, portrait mode that you can do with the phone, but
No. Yeah.
in like a vertical orientation, that's a really good way to do a landscape because you can get, let me pull one up here. You can get a lot of emphasis in the foreground with,
Oh, sure.
we're over here. There we are. So this one here, it really emphasizes these rocks in the foreground, and I wanted to emphasize them because of the way the light from the sun was coming through the trees, and it was just creating a dappled effect with the
Rocks.
with the shadow and the sun on the rocks and that. And I thought it was really cool. And then I just, and this is completely uncropped. It's edited a little bit just for color contrast, things like that. But it's, as far as the framing goes, that's just the way it was shot. And it shows, because it's a wide angle lens, it shows the vastness of the bay. And on the, I think it's on the right of the frame, and way off in the distance are islands.
Okay.
And I think that's mainland on the very far right over here, and then mainland over here. And this little ridge here, I know you can't see this on the audio, folks, but if you go to YouTube, you'll see this. That's the Niagara Escarpment.
Oh,
And
wow.
it runs from the tip of the Bruce Peninsula. Actually, it actually goes beyond that. It's under the water and whatnot. But the tip of the Bruce Peninsula, all the way down the peninsula through the city that I live in here in Owen Sound, and then right down to Niagara Falls, and the Niagara Falls goes over it, and it really creates a lot of great photo opportunities for landscapes. But that's what's off in the distance. But so this vertical orientation, when I try to tell somebody how to shoot a landscape, I'll often recommend shooting in vertical like this, just so you can have something in the foreground.
Can I make a guess here?
Yeah.
You're squatted down. You're not standing up straight.
You know what? I think you might be right.
Yeah,
I think you are correct.
A lot of people like to be standing up straight to take a picture. That's probably one of the worst ways of doing it, especially if you're trying to do something like this. So you want to squat down and get not as close to the ground as possible, but alleviate that height so that the rocks become more profound in the bottom of the photo.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think I did get down on my knees on a big rock that was right in front of me, and just to, like you say, emphasize that foreground. And I wasn't concerned about the background because it's just sky, or the trees on the left. There was cars parked just off the frame there. I just made sure they weren't in the frame, and everything on the right just fell in where it was. But I just thought, and this was a really windy day, and that's why the water's rippling as much as it is. But I'm surprised that there's not bigger, larger swells in the water, which would have made for maybe a nice effect too. But yeah, emphasize the foreground with a wide angle like that, and I think it'll give you a lot better landscape photo.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just show another one real quick here. This is back in the wintertime. I don't know if you know what this is, Joe, but this is snow.
We didn't get any this year.
I'm still going to send
you. We didn't get any here in South Carolina.
No. But this was a bitter, bitter cold morning, and this hoarfrost, it's called, um, develops through the night, and then as soon as the sun comes up, as soon as the sun hits this stuff, it's gone. So
Wow.
you have to be quick to get this stuff on anything. Like the trees in the background have some.
So it's
But
very
anyway,
fine frost.
yeah, very fragile. Like I think if I touched those branches, it would just fall off.
Okay.
So this was after work one morning, and that's the only way I'll ever get an early morning picture is if I'm just getting out of work off a night shift. But so this is with the wide camera, and this again shows the aesthetics of the image, how it looks with the different cameras. And what I tried to do is get this little shrub thing that has the hoarfrost on it to take up the same amount of space in the frame with the ultra wide. It's a little more stretched out, but you can see in the background, the trees on the edges start to angle because of the nature of that camera. And going back to that, so on the wide camera, they're a little more horizontal, the trees in the corners and that. It just doesn't. Yeah. And I'm sure with the telephoto, it would be even more natural looking, but I would have to stand way back across the road just to get this shot. But
Right.
but yeah, there's just the difference between the wide and the ultra wide, and how it makes the image look again. So, and something else I wanted to mention was doing macro with my moment macro lens. I could put it over the I should stop sharing this for a second. There we go. If I put the moment macro over the wide camera here, as opposed to the telephoto here. Now, on any other iPhone, this is the wide and this is the telephoto. But on the 12 Pro Max, they put the wide down here because the sensor takes up more room and it needed to be away from the corner of the phone. So that's why I'm pointing to this one. So to illustrate the difference between the wide and the telephoto when doing macro work, I'll go back to sharing my screen again. Where are we here? Okay, so with the wide, there's a little wee daisy. Now, this little daisy is only about maybe a half an inch from one side to the other. It's a very small little daisy. And I plucked it and brought it in, and it's actually sitting on my Bible. That's the black background. And so that's through the wide camera. So you can see the size of it there and the amount of magnification you get with a macro lens, right? And then you put it on the telephoto and it just brings everything in that much closer and gives you a lot better look at the detail. As far as image quality goes, well, with the wide camera, you have a little more depth of field. And I think it's because of, well, gosh, I really got to study this, because I'm talking about this in the book that I'm writing. And I said I might have to go back and change it when I study it more, but I said that the wide camera will have a little more depth of field than the telephoto. And I said that because that's kind of how traditional lenses work.
Right.
But I gotta do some research on that. But when you look at over in the left side here, see this part of the pedal?
Yes.
That's that part of the pedal is in focus. And you can see just how much of the the depth of field covers.
Right.
I apologize for people who are listening to this without seeing it, but what we're looking at is one of the petals on the daisy. There's just a little part of it that's in focus as it comes, off the center of the flower and heads out, just because of the angle that it is and all that stuff and the angle that it was captured. And then on the wide shot, I think there's a little more of the petal in focus. So the depth of field is a little larger. So that's the amount of the image that's in focus or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I just sent you a photo. I don't know if you can put it on your computer, but it's a flower. Yeah, there it is. And this is a wide angle shot, but I set the focus to be really close. And so this is not a portrait mode. This is an actual bokeh effect that the camera lens is doing naturally. And and so you can see what it looks like. I think it may be all right, but I think Apple would have probably messed it up in portrait mode if I tried to do it that way.
Yeah, probably. But that's a really nice bokeh from that lens. You got the 11 Pro, right?
Yeah, I have the 11 Pro.
Yeah, so that's an f1.8. The lower the f-stop number, the more blurred the background's going to be from an image that's focused up close.
Yeah,
and that is really that's a really nice bokeh effect from a phone.
I know. So the way I set this up was, I used my hand to set the exposure and the focus. So I took the camera, got my hand in front of it, and found where I could focus it sort of the closest. And then I moved the camera in on the flower. The flower's not that big. I moved the flower in and then took the picture. And what it did was it took out all the focus from the background and really set it up on the flower and those the leaves of the flower that are closest to it. And I was really happy with that one.
Yeah, it's a really nice shot. It just it emphasizes what that flower looks like. Whereas if that one wasn't there and all you had was the ones further back, you wouldn't really have a good look at it. And
and I want to say really cool. These flowers were the flower petals with the flower itself was probably about as wide as a quarter. So these are really small.
Oh wow, that is small.
Yes,
it looks a lot bigger than that.
Big. It can be deceiving, but these were really small flowers.
Yeah, that is. Oh, I mean, hey, look at the leaf down in the lower left corner of the frame. That kind of gives you an idea there. Like you would think that either that's a small flower or that's a really big leaf in the corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. Let's see, is there anything else? This one here kept popping up when I was trying to show other stuff, but this is just another example of a wide angle view. Just a tree. It's called the Summerfolk tree in town here, and this tree is on a slant that's probably, I don't know, about 35 to 40 degrees from the ground up. And it's just, I don't know how it ever got like that. I don't think it grew that way. I think something must have happened to the...
All right. When you see a tree out in the water, who's going to climb on it? Everybody's going to climb on it and want to jump off of it. Well, if you get a... I'm just saying that, people would climb on it and next it's growing sideways.
Yeah, that could very well be. And funny thing is okay, so you see how the water level is there?
Yeah.
Last year, see those rocks that go around the tree? Mm-hmm. Last year, I'll bet you there was another 1.5 feet of water in that whole bay. Like the water level was so high in the Great Lakes, and and this is excuse me, this is Georgian Bay, which is kind of up and off of Lake Huron, and Excuse me, I gotta get a drink. um, so the water level has gone down so much over the last year, and I think it's because it has something to do with last winter. The Great Lakes didn't freeze over as much as they had the few years prior to that. So yeah, it's crazy. That's kind of a little side note.
Huh.
But yeah, this photo of the tree, it just shows you um, the wide angle just gives you a kind of a sense of distance between the tree and the marina in the background there, and then the marina juts out into the bay, and the water kind of
Yeah.
goes off around behind that out into the oblivion again. And I took this shot because there's a light fog on the bay, and you can't really see it too well, but
Oh,
it's there.
yeah, I saw that.
It looked better in real life than it does in a photo, but
It
um,
probably looked closer.
yeah, oh yeah, and that's the other thing about a wide angle too. The ultra wide is even worse, but a wide angle will make things look further away than they really are.
Yeah.
Um, because like I mentioned earlier, the telephoto will try to it almost makes things look how they actually look with our eyes. So yeah, so I think that was all of them. Yeah, I think we went through them all. So um, that
Very
is pretty much how a wide angle looks. And again, if you're just listening to the audio, you're missing out. You got to go to the YouTube channel, and there will be a link in the show notes for the video for this, and you'll be able to see just what the wide angle can do and what it does. And any more thoughts on the wide angle?
No,
What, what
just
what about with what about with video? Like, is there any special things about video that stand out about with the wide angle?
well. So I primarily do all my video in wide angle, mainly because it is more forgiving. So let's say you're doing video with just the iPhone itself. You're not using another computer. So we'll start with that, and then I'll tell you my other process. When you want to do the wide angle, because the image stabilization is a lot better than the telephoto. You're just gonna because the phone can only handle so much, and if you're tilting back and forth, the iPhone can't compensate for that. So the I use a an Osmo gimbal if I can to help with the stabilization, and then I keep it on the wide angle because what happens is it's not the true wide. What happens with the videos, they crop in. And
Yes.
the reason why they crop in is for the image stabilization. So your hand can be doing this floating motion, but what they're doing is they're taking points and taking from the actual crop of the wide angle and stabilizing it. You can do that. So there's mechanical stabilization and then there's digital stabilization. So when you're doing both, it looks phenomenal. But the image stabilization, they crop in. So if you turn on your camera, if you're using an iPhone, you're going to be in the uh,
Hmm.
photo mode.
Yeah.
When you hit video, you're going to see all of a sudden it'll zoom in. And all they're doing is for video, you don't need the full on 12 megapixels. You only need a
No.
portion of that because 1080p is what I shoot in. So 1080p doesn't require that full frame. It's just way too much information. Uh, if you're doing 4K, then you may end up using the whole frame, but you don't need it. So it's going to zoom in. So it's what it's doing is it's actually taking out all um, the curved look of the frame itself, and you're getting the sweet spot in video. So
Yeah.
if you're going to video, do it in wide angle. Now, the other way I do it is I'm using iPhones as cameras, not as the um, not as the capture device. So I'm going to make some people's brains kind of like explode a little bit here. I use OBS, and there's an app called OBS Camera, and you load that app onto your iPhone, and you can use your iPhone as a webcam. I take three iPhones. I'm using iPhone 6s, and I loaded that app on there. It's about $15. And then I use OBS, and I can switch between the cameras as if I'm switching scenes. And I record onto my computer the video. And it's like, my mind's blown, because I basically, if I have my computer, have the lightning connectors, have the phones, I have a studio in my backpack. I use these microphones to be able to capture the audio, and yeah, my mind's blown. So same thing. When you're using OBS camera, you're using, actually what it does is it recognizes whether you have one camera, or like with my iPhone 11, three cameras. And so it has this thing called the tri-camera. I don't know how that works, but I think they're trying to use all the three cameras, the best features with it. I turn that off and just go with the wide, and just go straight to the wide angle. And I'm able to control the exposure, the light, the white balance, everything like that on each individual phone, so that they're not different. And I can set those and then switch through my scenes, and be able to create a video like I'm sitting there in a studio, changing from one camera to another. But I use the wide angle. I don't use the telephoto, and I typically don't zoom in unless I have to. But everything is set up just basically the same way I do video with the iPhone.
Yeah, that's cool. Going back to your point about the stabilization, I'll never forget that video you showed us with the phone stuck to the window in your Jeep.
So I had a coworker that he had the iPhone 8 Plus. I think it was the 8 Plus. And I think the 8 Plus had, I don't know if it was a 7 Plus or was it a 6 Plus? One of them had the first gen stabilization, mechanical stabilization. There was another word.
I think that was the 6S Plus. I think.
So the 6S Plus had, it was the first generation of the physical camera stabilizer in the phone. And apparently the stabilizer went haywire. And so it was one of the gear motors was just buzzing away. And if you took a video, it was just like, this whole scene was just crazy. And you can hear it trying to do whatever it did. But he ended up having to take that to Apple, and I think he got a new phone or something like that.
Yeah.
I still have that somewhere.
Yeah, I had that happen to me. I had my 8 Plus on a tripod, and it was a very, very windy day. And when the wind would hit the phone, I was shooting video, and the picture would just go like this. Because it's trying to compensate.
Yeah, it can't handle front and back. It can handle up and down and left and right. It can't do the front and back. It just, there's no room, and it's not set up to do that. So if you're holding the camera, what it's doing is it's just taking within that framework and using that shot. And like I think it was the iPhone 4S that had the digital image stabilization. And I took video. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I took video at my parents' house in California, and my brothers always use Androids, but I just showed them the video quality, and they're like, "Really? That's
Yeah.
amazing." They still didn't, go for iPhones. I don't care,
Yeah.
but at the time, the 4S, which is a dinky iPhone now, was state of the art, and that
Hmm.
image stabilization was huge for quality, and it just
Yeah.
got better over time. But there's no stabilization for moving front to back. It's always up and down and left and right and everything in
Yeah.
between of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, who knows what they'll introduce with the next line of phones? Now the in-body stabilization when the 12 Pro and that came out, they said that the 12 Pro Max does something like 5,000 adjustments per second to compensate for movement and stuff
You,
like that. So
you know what
that's
I think about that? That's 5,000 more problems than the previous model had.
yeah, that's right. I can't think of anything else to say about the wide camera. I know this kind of sounded more like a show about all the cameras, but I think it's only fair to compare the wide with the other ones just to kind of show um, what it does and what kind of look you get with the wide. And I think we tried to give some examples of why you would want to use the wide as opposed to the other ones. And
Yep.
I don't know.
All of them have their pluses, all of them have their minuses, but if you
Yeah.
understand which one gives you the best image for what you're looking for, it's great to have those options. And
Yeah.
I hope that people will recognize the flaws in all of them, so that they can be used for good, instead of like, oh, my head's fat, or or other stuff like, why do I have a inverted cone head? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like they all definitely have their merits and their faults and everything else. So, experiment with them, play around with them. I mean, if you have a phone like a 10R or an SE that only has the one camera, then you're pretty well limited to that type of image. But they have the zoom, and you digitally
absolutely.
zoom with them and that. But I rarely recommend that. I think if you want to zoom in, use your feet and walk up closer, unless you just simply can't do it. But
Crop to zoom is okay. Just don't go hog wild, and you
yeah.
can see how Apple fills in the gaps of what's missing.
Yeah.
I still, I really, and if you are a follower of Tiny Shutter, I said this years ago. I wish Apple gave us the ability to turn off the image stabilization in our phones. And
Yeah.
and what is the what's that other feature that they do? They have a digital image stabilization where they basically will create part of the image so that it looks clear. I don't know if it's a sharpening effect or what, but I wish that they would allow us to turn it off. But the reason why they don't is because somebody will turn it off and say my phone is broken, and
Yeah.
or they'll
Yeah.
say Apple iPhones take terrible images, when no, it's the dummy that's holding it is taking terrible images. So I understand why they don't do that, but I wish they could secretly give us a way to go and turn some of that stuff off, because I would, my 4S, I think I think it might have been the 5 that was the last. The 5 or 5S was the last uh, great iPhone to be able to get natural images, if you can call digital images natural
Yeah.
images, without them helping us make better pictures.
Yeah. yeah, if we could turn off things like deep fusion, that's something that you just can't turn off in the newer phones. You could probably get some more natural looking images. So unfortunately, we're stuck with them. But it's the 90-90 rule, right? They're going to please 90% of the people 90% of the time. And
yeah, we're the minority.
yeah, we're in that 10% who want to be able to do these things but can't. And you know what? It's either put up with it or get a traditional, like a DSLR or something, and use that. But no, not me. I'll put up with it.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, I think we got ourselves a show. Joe, tell us everybody where they can find you.
Wow. Okay. Well, I have Instagram. I don't post anything on there. I don't know why. I think it's just my, it's my behavior of wanting to go against the grain. But you can find me on Instagram, Joseph Ferreira. If you want to check out some of those videos that I'm doing with missionaries, my pastor is hosting. It's called The Harvest, but it's on the Faith Assembly YouTube channel, and you can see how I'm able to utilize the iPhones in creating different scenes. So one instance, pastor will have a camera up like I have right now, pointing to me, but then I'll have one off to the side to show him as a sort of a profile view while he's talking to missionaries, mostly on Zoom, because a lot of them are in other countries. And we had a couple that we did in person, but I was able to kind of do that setup. So if you want to find that, look for Faith Assembly, The Harvest, and you will find that on YouTube.
Cool. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, both on the YouTube video and on the audio podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Macmillan Photo, and on Twitter, Macmillan_photo. Dave, who couldn't make it tonight, you can find him on Instagram at ProfPod. On Twitter, I think he's ProfPod on Twitter as well. And he always likes to say that on Instagram it's for photos, and on Twitter it's general screaming and hollering about anything else.
Chaos.
So yeah. So we do the show every 2 weeks, and again, this we're starting to do video, and it's a work in progress. So bear with us on that, and we will try to make everything look and sound as good as we can. Let's see here. The podcast is available just about anywhere where you can get a podcast, Anchor, Spotify, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcast. Go to the website, iPhoneography.ca. There's a link in the show notes. And you could see different places on the right-hand side of the webpage where you can find the podcast, or just do a search for iPhoneography and it hopefully will show up. This podcast originated from a community that I host called the Artful iPhoneography Community, and it is on MeWe, which is kind of like Facebook, but not Facebook. It's a little more better, private. Yeah. And you can find it at artfulipc.club, and there'll be a link to that too. And Joe, I really appreciate you stepping in for Dave. He has family in town, and he wanted to see them, so he couldn't make it tonight. It's fun. Always fun talking to you and catching up, and your insights are wonderful when it comes to this stuff, especially the video stuff, which I don't do not enough of.
Had to do it by necessity.
Yep, that is so true. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Joe, and thanks again, everyone, for listening. And catch us on the YouTubes and on your podcast feed, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.